I've been counting down the days only because when you and I first started speaking now, I immediately knew that we needed to have a lengthy conversation. So, officially, welcome to Future Readiness with Dr. Ngao Motsei. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much. I've also equally been looking forward to the conversation because I've also started following you. And I remember the last comment I made was that I just love how you articulate, how you play with words and the deep message. It's only you that can only write the stuff that you write. So I'm quite excited also to have this conversation with you and to learn from you too.
Thank you so much. You know, you're not supposed to butter me up at the beginning, you're supposed to butter me up at the end. But you know exactly how to get people to settle into stuff. So before I get started, I now call you Dr. Ngao, but people who are going to be interacting with your magic for the first time, how do you describe yourself when people say, "Tell me about Ngao"? How do you describe yourself?
Wow, that's an interesting question. What comes to mind, what how I describe myself is that I first let me start by describing what I believe in. I
Yes.
believe in the world of and, not either or. I'm one of those. Some people are lucky enough when they get born or when they go to university, they know exactly what it is they want to do and they stay in that lane. I'm one of those people that have done different things and I'm very curious. The other thing that I would use, word I'd use to describe myself is that I'm very, very curious. Everything I do after a while, it's almost like there's a cycle of, okay, surely there should be something else. So as a result, that's why I call myself that. I say that I describe myself as believing in and not in either or, because I've done different things. I've got different passions. And for me, it was more around, but all these experiences and all these passions make me who I am, whole. So hence my end. I believe in the end. And I'm curious and everything that I've done and that I do continuously has led me to where I am.
Isn't that fantastic? Because I often say to people, I remember when I was interviewed at Gibbs, where we both have a academic relationship, and somebody on the call said to me, "What is going to be your research identity? Because it seems like you've done these many things." And I said, "Well, I don't have the luxury of living a single lane life, right? My life is intersectional, and therefore, by definition, my interests are varied and they're wide. But also because I'm a creative practitioner, curiosity is how I engage with the world. So it's fantastic. I guess it makes it obvious why we were able to latch onto each other because there's this, I want to know more about you, you want to know more about my world. But outside of your curiosity, and it's a powerful thing. Because oftentimes when we're asked to describe ourselves, we often go, I'm a mother's child, or we revert to our official roles, whatever's on your business card. But it's refreshing to have you say, let me start with my belief, because my belief then informs my behavior, and therefore what you see is a construct of that. So, walk me through how this wide funnel of all the various things you've done, which you have to tell me what they are, and then let us understand where the funnel thins out, and therefore what is your everyday occupation.
Yeah. So the touching on the world of end, I realized later on that in fact, what I believe in has a name. It's called a portfolio life. And the portfolio life is taken from the financial concepts. But essentially, I mean, I I started with the social sciences,
Yes.
and I'm a town planner, and I did strategy consulting, and I ended up being an executive in a listed financial services company, being the executive director for HR and transformation. And I'm not a traditional HR person, but how it came about was that in my consulting years, I ended up working mainly with exco teams, and I ended up working with HR heads. And I remember way back when, before it became fashionable about HR table on the seat on the table and things like that. I remember thinking to myself that I wonder if the HR heads that I was working with, I wonder whether they realize they know what impact they could make on businesses if they made it their business to actually understand the businesses that they were working in. And I remember thinking to myself that if I was to go into HR, I'm going to do HR differently. And lo and behold, as they say, be careful what you say, what you wish for. Long story short, I ended up being appointed the HR head for a big financial services company. In fact, two companies that were merging at the time. And boy or girl, did I do HR differently.
What exactly did you do?
So first of all was strategy, locating the role of HR within the strategy of the business, which meant that all the things that I've been saying, I made it my business to understand where the company is, the newly merged company is, what its vision is, what its growth strategy is, what its business model was at the time, and ask myself, what does this mean for me, HR head? What does it mean for HR? So it was more around, asking the right questions, not so much about having the right answers. So in asking those right, powerful questions, I want to believe we were able to craft a people strategy that spoke very directly and matched very directly the strategy of the company. But the other thing also was also to provide, if you like, the strategic direction in a form of the HR operating model, again, that spoke very directly to the business model of the company, making it clear for everybody across the HR community to understand their role and their contribution, contribution to the strategy of the organization. It sounds probably abstract, and I'm hoping it actually makes sense. But I mean, the first interesting thing was just to underpin what we do, and be able to show that what we are doing is, directly supporting the business, as it were, in its simplest sense.
And it's a wonderful thing that you're saying, because I have been in corporates where HR is the place you go to complain, right? And HR is the place you go when you're not happy with your raise, or HR is but basically, and there was always a very low level of trust between employees, as we were called, and the HR function. So I guess, so the question for you is, in your changing, or at least aligning HR with group strategy, what are the tensions you faced, and did you have ready people to believe that your direction was the direction that needed to be undergone by the business?
I had both tensions, both resistance and an appreciation for freshness, for a different type of thinking. Where there was resistance was because, either because we used to doing things this way. This is how we know HR is, just sort out our pays and things like that, just sign off our training and things like that. So as I said before, it became fashionable. I suppose my part of my thinking was already ahead to what became known as HR as a business partner, because part of the definition of our role and being able, one of the things that I had to learn also was to learn to be able to speak the business language, to demonstrate how, what we do, what its impact is on the bottom line. For example, in the context of South Africa, when we speak about transformation, was that it's not just a compliance thing, it's the right thing to do. And look what it does if we are fully transformed and be able to demonstrate and to show how good it is for business in rents and cents. Because in some instances, we would not get that big account, that big business, because we are not transformed. But over and above, beyond that, is about, it's almost like it's not just about shareholder value. Yes, we understand business is about shareholder value, but there's also a responsibility from the organization to contribute to the health of your ecosystem, because and within the community that you operate in. Because if there's no employment, if people have got no hope, and you literally don't have a business. So part of it was introducing in the exco table, in the boardroom, us having these kinds of conversations, so for me, it was, are we having the right conversations, not just tick box, some of this, because HR perhaps and transformation would typically be looked at as a tick box exercise. So by introducing these, and carefully too, because one thing that I learned very, very quickly was that you could have the best ideas, but it's about also your ability to read the room and to read because nobody's bigger than the system. And some of this, we're talking South Africa here, some of the, people come a long way. So to be able to break through and for somebody to listen to you, I had to quickly learn how to present certain things, and also learn how to, at times, to withdraw, to sub-optimize. I call it sub-optimizing, not compromising.
Not compromising.
Because sub-optimizing is pulling back, because you kind of have a sense that this is not the right time, and you pull back for the good of the whole, sometimes. So as you make progress, and you come back, and then when the time is right, and perhaps it falls on fertile ground. So there was a whole lot of all these things. It was the biggest learning for me. Typical examples of, I would say, something that I thought was the most earth-shattering thing ever I've said today, and it would fall flat. And my colleague, who's a male, or Afrikaner or white male, would say the same thing, and it was like, whoa, Mr. So-and-so, this is brilliant. So those are some of the dances, if you like, and the tensions. But it was also all good. Earlier we spoke about everybody's doing the best that they can.
Yes.
And we all know, you also were in corporate, we all know the dynamics of when somebody different enters a system, what it does. And half the time, there's also the inability, how do I work with this, and so on. It's a dance. It's about finding, everybody finding their way. So those were the most incredible times. And school for me, that you'd never experience elsewhere.
And I can see from how your face brightens that the memory of it also, I guess, is a celebration of how far you've come, given your understanding. Because we've touched on EQ, your ability to just read the room, but also a sense of timing, right? Because everything has to do with timing. Delivery is everything. In the creative business, we talk about not only just timing being everything, but also just the right tone and the right frame of mind. So when you find somebody who is thinking about getting home in time before the traffic and you're trying to pitch them an idea, it's not going to land because I've got another thing that they're thinking about. Here's what I like about what you've just said. You have located, and which is fresh, because you've located people at the center of how business wins or how business may lose or how business behaves. In our own practice, we talk about human centricity because more and more of our corporate clients are speaking about customer centricity. And my pushback to them is we are consumers some of the time, but we're human all of the time. So the brands that we know will thrive in the future, or the businesses that we know will thrive, are the ones that locate the human being at the center of everything they do. So here's my question to you. Why are we called human resources? Well, how can a human be a resource? Why don't you just call it human relations?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm not going to, I almost said something. So, because I was having a conversation just yesterday with some of our colleagues around similar what you say. And I'm not going to say what we are talking about because when they hear this, they're going to know I'm talking about them. But I mean, without saying, I'm going to answer it in this way.
Yes.
Is the importance of language, what we name things, so for me, for example, I've at least, and it's not that it's better human resources or human capital. I've kind of, it was more what is better, the better of a lesser, of a lesser of a lesser thing. But I think it also, without answering it directly, I don't know why. And actually, I never questioned it, except I know specifically when I went to the role that I spoke about. I remember I specifically called the unit I was responsible for strategic HR.
Got it.
So I put the strategic in front of the HR, and the intent, just by putting that, it was signaling the intent that, hey, look at us differently now. Strategic means something. While the resources were still there, sadly, but at least the strategic was there. So I don't know what we call, and I've never. So you've actually given me something to mull over. What might be the best way? You said human relations. Is it just about relations? I would argue. I would ask you the same question. Is it just about relations, or is it more than relations? It's about people, putting people in the center of business where it matters. For me, having been a strategy consultant, I'm always thinking strategy, and the good old, what they say, what matters, get measured. And usually things that are strategic get measured because they bring value and things like that. So perhaps and everybody that's going to be listening to us, that's a challenge then that we're throwing out to, particularly not just people in the HR community, but also CEOs, leaders of organizations, and mainly because what we name things,
Yes.
influence what those things and behaviors and everything become.
And that is true. I mean, I remember there was a time when nobody would be caught dead driving a second-hand car, but we're okay driving a pre-owned car now, right? Because second-hand, no, pre-owned, of course, it's a smart decision. But that's a long way from your days in corporate to where you are now. Because I remember our first conversation, and I it stuck in my throat, this idea that we could use the word bullying with the workplace. As somebody who was bullied, I went to a boarding school, a Catholic boarding school in Swaziland, and I still remember my bully's name. This is how long-lasting an imprint a bully has. She was smart, but she was lazy, so she wanted me to write her tests. And when I refused, she put shoe polish in my school shoes. So when I put in my white socks, it was a mess. Or I'd be on the swing and she'd switch partners with a friend who was pushing me and pushed me. Literally, we had an orchard the one time. She pushed me so hard, I flung over the orchard fence and and landed in the pawpaw trees. But it wasn't fun. Yeah. Not at all. But I think what I'm saying is it is so refreshing to have you so single-minded about the scourge and how it manifests in the workplace. So I guess the starting point would be, why was that an interest area of yours? And two, what are the myths that you have to debunk? Because people think when they're being assertive, it is how they speak, is not necessarily being a bully. So I'm interested in how you define bully and why you think it's a thing that the world should be paying attention to.
Yeah. Well, how I came about, again, we are Africans, I suppose. We're storytellers. I'm going to tell a very short story. How it came about, I was working, in part of my corporate life, but I had a particularly terrible time myself with my line manager. I was trying to understand what is going on. And I describe myself, first of all, going back to your initial question.
Yes.
I have what they would call a strong personality. I speak up. And from I take what I do seriously. I work. I'm a performer. So I was doing all these things and performing according to standards, but there was always something. And, to cut a long story short, one day after a particularly bad day on a Friday, I got home and thanks to Google, I typed in whatever I typed in, and boom, this thing that came back has a name. It's called workplace bullying. So I read and read, and and I looked at what the descriptors of what workplace bullying is, and I said to myself, but this is what is happening to me. And my first reaction was, no, I cannot be bullied, because again, the misconception that people that are bullied are, weak victims, and they cannot speak for themselves. Yes, it might be true, but that is not always the truth. And at that time, I was also contemplating doing my PhD. So the more I read, I suppose in our world, your PhD, I started doing pre-literature review without knowing that I was doing my literature review. Started reading up a lot about studies that were written all over the place, but very few in South Africa. And one of the things that I realized was that most of the studies were looked at the time from almost like an interpersonal view, as bullying as being about between the bully, somebody that bullies, and the person that's being bullied. And being at the time, I didn't even know that I'm an organizational behavior scholar, and also as a leadership scholar or somebody that was interested in leadership. I decided at that time that I really want to understand this phenomenon, because I was seeing, I began, it's almost like it gave me new eyes, new set of eyes with which to look at organizations. And I started realizing, seeing the toxicity that were in organizations and how it was impacting people negatively, their wellness, their whole demeanor. And at that point, I decided that if I was to be a leader, when I become a leader, the biggest leader, with the biggest title, this is not how I want to lead. And as I said at the time, I was contemplating going into doing a PhD, and I decided then that I'd like to study this phenomenon, but looking at it from an organizational lens. So look at specifically what are those organizational factors that make bullying likely, and for it to happen, and why it actually thrives. And of course, I wanted to look at it from some of those organizational factors or leadership. And bullying thrives when it gets reported, for example, and we look the other way. And again, further on in my working life, I also realized how it manifested, and it manifested in conduct. It's really about conduct. It's about the conduct, because most of the stories that came back to me, and that I'm continuously, as I continue to work in the space, that I hear, is that people say, no, I'm not bullying, I'm simply doing my job. I'm managing performance. I've got high standards. And I often, my response is, and I appreciate that. And you have to do that. It's your responsibility as a leader to manage performance and to manage the standards that you agreed with. But this is where it becomes problematic, where it crosses is conduct. How are you doing that? So one of the bullying manifests in different ways, and there are certain behaviors that some are quite overt and some are covert and much more sophisticated. You're not even sure, hey, what just happened there? So there are three things that, through my work and through the literature that I've come to, I hope I'll remember the three things, but it's about consistency, the behavior, the belittling, and the humiliating, the doing this, if threats, if you because I'm in a position of power, I ask you to do something in however way I do that. If you question, I threaten you with things like it's insubordination. I'm the leader. You're not supposed to do that. So, and the key here is that it happens over time. So consistency. And then the other thing is that over time it escalates, it becomes worse. And one of the reasons why the behavior becomes worse, even because is one of the big reasons, is that when it's reported, nothing ever gets done about it. And one of the issues might be that some of the leaders, some of the best performers, so-called best performers in the businesses, are the biggest bullies.
Yes.
And because they are the best performers, everybody looks, the other way, because we cannot afford to lose this guy or this lady, because they they're the best performers. And over time also, there are themes. You can actually begin, some kind of themes begin to emerge of that behavior, the tactics that the bully uses to intimidate or to bully. There are different ways that I define bullying. And one of the other things I would say is that I suppose the complexity with definitions and with defining bullying, unlike, for example, harassment, there is still no universally agreed definition of what bullying is. Having said that, though, there is agreement on what behavior, what type of behavior is considered to be bullying. And of course, taking into account the three, it's consistent, it escalates, and tends to have a power imbalance.
So, but and it's refreshing that you talk about the power imbalance, because as you're speaking, I'm also wondering whether in your work you're experiencing peer-to-peer bullying. Is there such a thing?
There's such a thing, peer-to-peer bullying, and oftentimes even downward bullying, where somebody, or upward bullying, sorry, where somebody in a junior position can bully somebody. However, what makes that possible for that to happen is this thing. At least what I found in my work is power imbalance. And power imbalance is there's normal, if you like, normal power, where because by virtue of the position that I hold, and where in the box organogram, which box I sit on the organogram, which gives me power. And then there is power which has got nothing to do. There's what we call informal power, because there's an official organogram with where the official power lies, but there's also informal informal power. The power imbalance may also come in where I may be a junior, but I have strong relationships with the big bosses. And I've got the big bosses' ears. So by virtue of that, that gives me power because, and often I find people almost like unnecessarily when we're having a conversation and I'm listening in, and they always like talking about, when I was with so and so, the so and so being the big boss on Saturday, whether at a match or at a braai. So the fact that you have access means you may be privy to other information that otherwise ordinarily you wouldn't have by virtue of where you sit. So power imbalance come in different officially and unofficially by virtue of your relationships and access to power.
Isn't that incredible? Because I mean, you've just pierced another balloon, right? Because I think in the traditional construct, all of us think that bully is top down, but we have this peer to peer, and then we also have this bottom up. Because you're correct, if somebody is a niece to the CEO and they work in your team, it does make it difficult, right? Sometimes for you to call them to order. But if these are all the things that are happening in the workplace, how do you define the workplace? Because with COVID and the lockdowns and people were working from home and people were working from cafes, other people were taking calls in their cars. How would you define the workplace? And what do you think has changed in the last 2 years, if anything?
Well, what we now know is that the workplace is no longer a place that you go to.
Yeah.
And the workplace is no longer so it's no longer a building, it's not a function of space or something that you go to. So the workplace, I mean, I often said that, in the advent of the pandemic, the last 2 years, we actually should not be saying that, be calling it working from home, but it is, is living at work or something like that, because home and work has combined. and which was in the beginning, and some of the dynamics that it brought was that because it's almost like there was no boundary, there were no boundaries, and because you're at home, you're supposed to be switched on all the time. So one of the I digress a little bit, but going back to what we spoke about in the world of bullying, what the virtual work has done has in some instances intensified the bullying, with the expectation of being online 24/7, and what it does is some of the intimidations and the humiliation which now happen on email, using technology. So the reach, it goes quite faster, the reach is wider. So the workplace, and this is something that now everybody is talking about, is defining, because even though of course it's rearing its head elsewhere, the COVID is manageable, and there's been calls for coming back to work, but the reality is that the virtual world is not gone completely.
Yes.
So the workplace is going to be that continuum between the home and some place, whatever that place might be, whether it be office block, whether it be wherever it is that people work. And what I'm finding is that hybrid is actually here to stay. So some of the things that people are grappling with and leaders are grappling with is how to do hybrid right
Yes.
for their own organizations in the context of their organization. And saying that, one of the things, as I was thinking and getting myself ready to speak to you, actually occurred to me the future of work that we're talking about. What future of work? Because the future of work is here. You know, what was meant to be happening, what we were saying is going to be happening, is already happening. So the question is, how do we then work in this future that's already happening? Well, come to think of it, before the pandemic, everybody else was talking about the technology, how technology is going to take over, and everybody was developing that digital strategies. We're talking about digital strategies, and we're talking about the impact of technology. Now, nobody's talking about it, but doing it.
Yeah. So then how do you deal with the bully who still is intimidating me over distance? Because I guess the question is, if I have a leader who's been a bully when we work in the same space, and I thought that there was some level of reprieve when I was working from home, I'm now re-entering the space, right? What counsel can you offer? And more importantly, do you think there is a way to rehabilitate leaders who are bullies?
Very interesting questions. First of all, one of the things that the work that I'm doing is first, there's the awareness raising. There's an educational bit, because in South Africa, although we're now beginning to talk about bullying, we're still not. It's still a silent epidemic in the workplace, because there's still almost like, I don't want to, I cannot say I'm being bullied because I might be perceived as weak, and so on and so forth. So part of the work that I do personally is that I speak about, I get invited to speak in organizations. So that's the awareness raising bit. So, and I usually do, I've crafted two pieces of work, if you like, whether it be workshops or webinars, where I speak with staff around what is bullying, how do they recognize it, and what to do if they suspect that they are being bullied, or if they suspect that somebody, what they are witnessing is bullying. And one of the things that I speak about, in order to really do something about this, is to, first of all, to get ourselves knowledgeable about what it is and being able to identify it, and knowing what to do. And I'll also speak about the concept of the bystander. That fascinates me. And my stance is that there is no such thing as an innocent bystander, because when you are seeing and viewing whatever is happening and you do nothing, you are complicit yourself. However, that said, it's not as easy as that, because people often don't know what to do. So that's part of what I do in some of the work that I do, the interventions I do. And then I have a specific session with leaders and leaders only, where I address some of the things that we spoke about, around the responsibility of leaders to ensure, because it is their responsibility to create a work environment where, free of bullying, where people can feel free to be able to speak up without reprimand. So I usually take them through a whole process, based on research, my own research, and other research from some of my associates globally, which they have put into, we've put into some kind of interventions to help leaders to manage to do something about bullying, from creating, whether it be policies, but creating, if you like, empowering, having people champions that are essentially going to be the eyes and ears, and of ensuring that this does not happen. And your last question about whether there's reprieve, or whether you said what, rehabilitated?
Yes. Can you rehabilitate a bully?
So this is one of the reasons why I, over and above, in my other portfolio, I'm a coach. I trained and certified as an integral coach. But since doing this work, I then went and actually certified myself as a specialist coach, a coach specialized in dealing with abrasive leaders. So there's an institute in the US called the Boss Whispering Institute. So the founder is an associate who I found. We both belong to the same association, the International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment. So she has done research for years on bullying, and she crafted a specific process for working with leaders, and I like that. And the reason I like that was, what I'm finding is that some of the people that have been accused of bullying, first and foremost, are not even aware. The level of self-awareness is very, very low. They are not aware that what they are doing is actually harming people. So you find, therefore, when they get this feedback, more often than not, it really hits hard. And of course, you always have to deal with defensiveness. And once you've gone through the defensiveness, then there's almost like, ooh. And my approach is always, do you want to be viewed in this way?
Yes.
If you don't want to be viewed in this way as a leader, then I'm happy then to work with you as an ally, as your core researcher, to actually help you gather data and understand why people perceive you the way that you do. And from there, then we craft interventions on coaching themes and what we do. So yes, I do believe that people could rehabilitate, but there's a but. The proviso that whatever is happening has been the leaders' blind spots. They were not aware of this, and there's ultimately the willingness to do something about it. And then you have at the extreme some people that are almost like bordering on narcissism, being narcissists. Those, there is absolutely nothing you can do about that. Nothing you say, because it's not everybody. It's me against the world. I'm right. Everybody else is wrong. So you can't do anything about it. And my reason for choosing to work with people that have been accused of bullying is because I think if we get it right, we can solve the problem. And I mean, my big, hairy, audacious goal is to rehumanize organizations, workplaces, one leader at a time. And that's exactly what I mean. If you get it right, especially with leaders that have been viewed in a negative light, if people see a shift in the leader that used to rub people the wrong way, if there's that shift, I think it can only be positive, and it can, permeate and cascade throughout the organization. So that's why I do what I do. And I work sometimes with leaders that have been accused of being bullies. First, I don't even call them bullies. I prefer the term, coming to the earlier conversation about
naming.
naming abrasive leader, because abrasion is a behavior that you can work with, and a behavior you can change. But a bully is an identity. So it's an identity. It's almost like that's it. That's what you are.
I am so thankful you're doing this work, but also just so delighted that the world will get to hear about the work you're doing. But also because as you're speaking, I'm also reflecting on my own leadership journey, right? Because I know that when I first was appointed to a position of power in an organization, I didn't know how to lead people. I thought that seniority was about barking instructions. And if you weren't barking instructions, you were reminding people who you were in case they forgot that you were their senior. So literally, you're just going around just hurling power. And much later, you then realize that the use of force is an act of powerlessness. Because if you know and understand your power, you don't have to be forceful. If anything, cruelty comes from the weak, because there's this sense that somebody's going to discover my low self-esteem or the things that I don't know. So let me just try and bolster myself. So I am just thankful for South Africa and for Africa that you're doing this work. And anyone who's listening, your digits and your contact info will be on the podcast, so they know how to find you and they can reform organizations. Because the minute you say rehumanizing, you speak to me, because I've always been insistent that in our practice we solve for humans. We don't solve for people. Because when I've had too many glasses of champagne, oftentimes I'll say, I love humans. People, I'm not so sure. But
that's a good one. That's a very, very good one. I must remember that.
Humans, my favorite. People, not so much. Not so much. Not so. So you've seen what's unfolding, and you correctly then said, Zah, there is no future of work. It is the thing that we're living now. But what do you think comes next? As in, what would you have leaders think about really, really strongly about what's around the bend? And then, and I guess it's joined up to the last question, which is, what does future readiness look like? in the world of work? Readiness look like in the world of work?
I'm going to answer the two questions in the same way. This is what's occurring to me. What is occurring now, and the and organizations of the future, or what I would like to call leading into the future,
Yes.
has implications for leadership and managers. And for leaders, it's almost like it requires what we talked about, being human centered. Being means developing other competencies, or deepening other competencies for leaders. I often speak about, more leaders ought to have compassion, more empathy, and it means being active listeners, and understanding that the human is the employee is a complete human, is not just the employee is part of the entire human. So it also speaks to leading with care, understanding that. And why leading with care? Because everybody now talks about DEI, diversity, inclusion, and all those wonderful things. But leading with care and compassion, creates or births belonging. We talk about inclusion, and I love that, and it's very important. But for me, what is even more important is the sense of belonging, because, I think I was listening, I can't remember who I was listening to, talking about the definitions of inclusion and belonging, which I really love that much. And the person, I'll remember who it was. Oh, I think it was from Dare to Lead, the book Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. And was saying that I think she was actually talking to, youngsters, children at school, and asking them about this. But essentially, the sum total of what they said was that inclusion is when somebody invites you in. And when somebody invites you in, you try to fit in. Yes. In order for you, Za, to be part of this exclusive club, these are the requirements. These are the things that we want you to meet in order for you to be included. So, and it's not about a good or bad thing. It's about the distinction. So inclusion is about being invited and you fit in, whereas with belonging, you are taken just the way you are. And accepted the way you are. So I think the world of work of the future requires that, and the responsibility lies on leaders to be able to create environments where people feel that they belong, and they need those competencies, and those are very important to create environments where people can feel that they belong. And when somebody feels that they belong, obviously they feel that they matter, they feel seen, they feel heard, so they can even show and do more. Because when people, and I think research has shown that when people are happier, they do more, they're more productive, they go more than the extra mile. So that is what the pandemic, I want to believe, has shown us, that the caring, leading with care, is important for the sustainability and growth of enterprises. So what it therefore means from a manager, so I spoke about leaders, and because I'm all about leaders, but I've also been thinking a lot more about managers, the middle managers, because those are also one of the most important people in organizations, and what they require. And this ties to obviously to my work, because one of the things that I'm finding with the people that bully is that they are micromanagers. They micromanage to almost, like I almost said, to death, but I don't have any other word for it. And there's nothing wrong with micromanaging, but a good manager ought to know how to manage, because you manage people differently. Some people don't need, all you need is to provide the direction and have and you go away, that it's going. Some people need to be checked on and all that. So that's also what I suppose the implication for managers. But the other is, this concept of macro managers versus micromanagers. So what managers are to the competencies, I suppose they also need to be able to do, especially in times of uncertainty, is to be able to provide the context, and within what you can provide, the assurances that you can provide, and provide the direction, and get out of the way.
Get out of the way, she says. Get out of the way. This has been such a delightful chat. Now, and I know that we'll have another occasion to speak again, but thank you so much. I can tell you, my own head is just popping with the things that we can take into organizations, because when we enter business through the door of brand, right? And we've often said that your employees are also an expression of your corporate brand. So if your employees are happy and the business is thriving, then everybody is having a wonderful, good time. But I am so grateful for your work. As always, I wish you just clarity on what else needs to be done and the courage to go out there and get it done. But thank you. It has been such an absolute joy.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was wonderful. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a conversation.
So stay out of harm's way until I see you on campus.
From now on, Full Circle will be called Future Readiness with Zar, and we'll still have those thoughts expanding conversations and the streams of encouragement that you enjoy. If you're already subscribed to Full Circle with Zar, you are automatically subscribed to Future Readiness with Zar, and you can continue to listen to all the conversations on the podcast platform of your choice. But also let me know if there are any specific topics or guests you would like us to host. Enjoy, like, and share. And until the very next time, I wish you clarity and courage.